Right folks, welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the landscape of Scotland. For this adventure we've actually come not in the countryside this time, but in the little town of Kirriemuir, which is actually where the K in BKR comes from. And this is actually the town that I grew up in. I thought, why not come today for a walk about the town of Kirriemuir and just see what we see. And just check out this initial building on our left here. This is actually the town hall. And then next to it we've actually got the public library. And there's actually a remembrance on the wall there with the Polish flag, and it says a memento from the Polish troops stationed at Kirriemuir from 1940 to 1941, and that shows a little bit of World War II history early in the video here folks. So another interesting thing that Kirriemuir is famous for, it was actually the home of J.M. Barrie, who was a famous author and playwright back in the day, and he actually, one of his most famous pieces of work is actually Peter Pan. So whoever's heard of Peter Pan, this is the very town that the place was written in. And it's cool to think about that, the local stories of history related to these wee towns. The famous people that are almost forgotten that came from these lands, and the things that they did when they were alive can like stay remembered forever, like the workings of Peter Pan and the story of that. It's incredible. And this building here is actually the building where J.M. Barrie was born, and it's called Barrie's Birthplace, and it's a famous little tourist kind of attraction here in Scotland, and I think it's a National Trust building. And there's actually this little wash house is where J.M. Barrie put on his first little plays, I think for his friends and like his brothers and sisters. So it's quite interesting. Let's take a peek in since we're passing folks.
Were charged preens, bulls or peeries, or as we know them now, pin badges.
Wash house folks. It's a sneak peek into J.M. Barrie's wash house. Yeah, so that's interesting to see. I love these little alleyways that these towns have got. Shout out to that folk there that was making their way into the J.M. Barrie Museum. Maybe one day we'll have to go in there for a look on the channel, document more in-depth history of J.M. Barrie. But actually around in the town square there's a monument, a statue of Peter Pan, which is dedicated to the J.M. Barrie history in this area. And it's cool sometimes in places like this. There's like so many wee nuggets today with the story. Like look at this, the Barrie fountain. A little water fountain. I actually remember when this was put in, this used to be a rough bit of ground at this corner. It's amazing how these wee towns change over the years. Businesses change. What used to be some shops often end up turned back into houses. On the right hand side here, this used to actually be a petrol station when I was young. But now I believe it's the private car park for this pub here, which is the Thrums. And Thrums is actually a name which J.M. Barrie gave to the areas of Kirriemuir, because Thrums are actually the names of the offcuts of the string that they used to use in the weaving mills, and that's actually what Kirriemuir was built on. And I think J.M. Barrie's family used to all work down at the famous Wilkies Factory here in Kirriemuir, and it's down at the bottom of this hill. Check this out, here's another one of these red phone boxes. Probably not even used as a phone nowadays. A lot of these never got used enough, so they got shut down. Sometimes they're like little miniature libraries and things nowadays for the local community. They can come and leave spare books there or pick up interesting little books that they've never read. I'm just thinking the Kirrie Square's actually this way. I was going to take a wee walk down to Wilkies Factory, but I think we'll go to the Kirrie Square first and check out the Peter Pan statue, because that'll be quite cool to see, since we've just seen Barrie's birthplace right here. Check out these little streets, Kirkwind, leading round to other little parts of the Kirriemuir area. That's what I love about Kirrie, the character of these streets and the old buildings. And it's so interesting to see. And this used to be the bank here at the right hand side, the Royal Bank of Scotland. And there's actually an interesting thing, like a few years ago when it was still open, the cash machine actually got blown out the wall with gas. People stole it and took it away. Apparently, people from England or whatever, it was a big operation. It's mad little things like that happen in small towns like this. Over the years, all these shops just chop and change. Check this out, folks, at the roadside here, a little Triumph Herald. Old vintage car. It's cool to see that in the town. Looks like it's still used as like a daily driver. And then look at this building at the far side. It's actually empty. It's got no slates on the roof. And that used to be called Hooks, which was quite a popular Kirriemuir pub when I was young. I remember going in there quite often to watch like live bands, live performances, often on a Friday or Saturday night. So check this out, folks, we've made it to the town square, and this is the famous statue I was telling you about of Peter Pan. And this statue actually used to be located around the corner from here. There used to be an actual oat cake factory around the corner, and the statue used to be next to that. But now here it stands proudly in the Kirriemuir Square. And it's quite an interesting area, this. There used to actually be a building in the middle of the road here, and the road used to go each side of it. And apparently underneath the stones in the ground here, there's actually two metal lids with steps going down, and that used to be the town air raid shelter in World War II apparently. But that was a local story I got told. I'm not sure like if that's definite or whatever, but apparently that is there. So it's so cool to see. But there's Peter Pan playing his little flute. So this building here, folks, is actually the gateway to the Glens Museum here in Kirriemuir, and it's an interesting building with a lot of history. It's actually called the Townhouse, and throughout its life it's actually been an old toll house, because you used to have to pay to go down this hill out of the town or back in. And then later in its life it was used as the town jail. So you can just imagine the jail cells and stuff which were within this building at a certain time. The local baddies were probably locked up for a weekend. And if you're ever wanting fast food or takeaway, this is the street to come as well. Right into the square, we've got the Chinese, and then the Kirriemuir Cuisine. What an excellent name. That's been on the go. That's been in the area here since I lived here, and it's cool that it's still thriving. Again, on a Saturday night, this is where you would come down if you were needing some munch. And the Steeple is a top fish and chip shop in the area here. But yeah, look at this townhouse from this side. You can see how over the years the doors have been like bricked up, but the old numbers still painted on there. That's another thing I love like about some of the old shops and that. You can see how above the doors it's been painted on at an ancient time, and then it still just remains. This is the other end of that Kirkwind when we look down that wee narrow street. So it said 1688 above that door of that house, and that just shows the ancient construction of this town, and it shows how long this town stood here on this bit of land in Angus. Here we go, folks, we can hear the church bell, and I've just made it round the back of this buildings here, which used to be the old cinema in Kirriemuir, and it used to be, I think it still is, Vizoki's ice cream shop. But this interesting stone carving here was actually carved from the same gentleman as the stone carving we saw in the last video dedicated to Captain Scott, and it was made by a stone sculptor and carver called Bruce Walker, who's done a lot of works in this local area here in Angus. It's quite impressive to see the globe here. And this was obviously the Millennium special carving that he did. And his shop used to be here, I believe, but I don't know if it's still on the go or whatever. So this stone on the ground here is telling us about James Barry. And look, 1860 to 1937. Yeah, it's incredible. 1937, not even that long ago really. And another famous Kirriemuir related famous person, folks. Ronald Belford Bon Scott, born Kirriemuir 18th of July 1946, and he died the 19th of February 1980, and he's obviously the famous artist from the band AC/DC, and he's got a statue at the bottom of the hill as well. Check out, folks, Kirriemuir mosaic on the wall here. So there's quite a lot of art and interesting little things like that in this town. Look at this wee closey. It's mad just to see these wee narrow streets. Think about how they've changed over the years and the folk that may have walked down them over the years. It's so cool. So an interesting thing here with this town, folks, this is where the old main road used to come straight up past the old town hall, past likes of this shop here, Realm of Imagination. These are like some Harry Potter style shops in this town. Whereas now this street here is just a pedestrian way and it's called the Wee Roads. Whereas this would have been the main road through Kirriemuir and then up the roads up the hill there. So it's quite cool to see. And they've got the bunting here, which I think it was put up about the New Year time, whatever. Wow, it's mad. Look at that, folks, that's the old red British post box, which you still get kicking about. The Royal Mail, I think, is privately run nowadays, but the old post boxes are still used, still in operation. This is another pub, we used to go here quite a lot, the Ogilvy Bar. It's been on the go for years in Kirriemuir. And then further up here used to be the Roods Bar, but I don't even know if it's still open. Oh, it is. Yeah, the Roods Bar has survived. I remember the pool table in this pub used to be uneven, and when you hit the ball, it used to go in a curve. So you had to take that into account when you were taking your shot. At the top of the Roods here, folks, we've got a famous little sweetie shop, which is the Star Rock shop. And they're known for making, obviously, sticks of rock with the writing going right down through the middle of them. Yeah, that's cool, folks. You see the sweeties in there. All made on site here, I believe. Yeah, that's cool. We've done basically a circuit of the Kirriemuir Square in this video, and it's sometimes quite cool doing that. There's a one-way system around Kirriemuir. This road used to go both ways around, and you could drive both ways, but then at a certain time, traffic got busier, cars are even bigger. So they just go one way around here now. What have we got here, folks? This is the old police station of Kirriemuir, and look, the Tayside Police Museum. Like, that's interesting. I wonder what is even going on. Look, there's a red phone box here still in use. Check it out. So unlike the one we saw at the other side of the town, this one's actually still in use, which is super cool. And I'm not sure what they're doing with the police museum. That could be interesting to see. Yeah, this is where you would come if there was an emergency and pick the phone up. I think the main police office is no longer here, and there used to be jail cells and stuff in here as well. You can see the old building there. Right, folks, we've now come to the second part of this video, and a minute ago we were outside the police station. Now we've come in, we're inside the police cell right now for the first time ever on a video, and it's actually a really interesting museum. The kind gentleman here has just shown me around and given me a description of each thing, so now I'm going to go around and have a look, share the history of the Scottish Police Force with people all over the world, and get in the comments what bit of the world you're from, and if you recognise any of this police like memorabilia that you're about to see. We're starting off here in this cell looking at the old uniforms. Just check it out. Some of these are all different ranks of police, and obviously all different years as well. The special constable there with the, looks like a fine black material. The other ones are almost like a bluey colour or a lighter colour. And then this is the female police uniform here. The female police were also given like a handbag, leather handbag when they were on duty, with a few different items which they may need on their daily duties. And look at this, folks, this is actually a stab proof vest here, which is quite heavy, and it's packed with Kevlar. And if anybody's in the Kirriemuir area, they can come into this museum and have a look around, and if you've got kids and that, it's quite interesting. There's a few things they can get involved with and a few things they can look at. This is the massive cell doors here, folks. Look at the size of that lock. There's no way you'd be able to break through that if you were in an angry temper. And in this second cell here, folks, this is actually a representation of how tall you used to have to be a policeman. You had to be over 6 foot. And this is actually the bike here that they used for patrolling the Glen. And it's just a single gear. And look how high the frame is, because the police were always so tall. This is what they were fleeing about the Glen on. And then this bench here was actually, if you were a boy aged between 9 and 12 and you had done like a misdemeanour in the local area, you could actually get tied, or like, I think you probably sat down on here and you would get hit with these massive straps, and you got a certain number of lashings depending on how bad you had been or what you had done. So that's interesting as well. Like, that sort of thing used to go on back in the day and it was normal. But maybe that's how society's so out of control nowadays. None of that's getting done. And then in this cabinet here, this is some paraphernalia or whatever that they've actually like found when they've been clearing houses or arresting people. See this interesting artefact here, folks? This is actually a thing the police used to take to schools to educate the teachers on what to look for. And same for any parents watching this video. If you see your kids with any of this paraphernalia, you'll ken what they're up to. So in this next room here, folks, it's really interesting because this actually has got the history of the police Thrungin here, and some of these are just like they wouldn't have actually been used in frontline service. They were more of a decorative Thrungin. And this interesting little thing here, it looks like a cigar. That was actually what they would have had back in the Victorian days. That was like a bit of an ID card kind of thing. They would show that to prove that they were a genuine police officer. And in this display here, we can actually see, this is how handcuffs have changed over the years. All the different shapes. And then this is another interesting thing here as well, because this is things that they've confiscated over the years. And this hammer, number 12 in the display here, that was actually used in a murder in Dundee apparently. A gentleman murdered his wife with that weapon, which is just savage. And then look at this here, all those like different things people have just rigged up. And then this is other items which have been confiscated out of like traffic stops or anything like that. It's mad to think people would be fleeing about with machetes and stuff like this in their car. It's such a massive unit. And then this is another interesting story here about William Henry Burry, who was actually caught for a murder in Dundee. And it appeared in the Courier in 1899 according to that there. But there's an interesting book written by Ewan Macpherson who has a theory that this gentleman here, William Burry, was actually Jack the Ripper. And Jack the Ripper was a famous like murderer for London, and they never caught him, and that's what makes him unique. But as soon as this guy here was apparently arrested in Dundee, there was no more murders from Jack the Ripper. And that's how that theory has got like a bit of weight to it, but it's not conclusive obviously, because he was caught so easily for this murder in Dundee that I reckon he wouldn't have had that intelligence to be Jack the Ripper. But the story is still unique and interesting. And then in this case here is an interesting story from the Claypot Siege, which occurred in Dundee 1977, where this gentleman had been wanted and he actually took a couple as hostage, and there was like some mad standoff at Claypot's Junction with the police and the gentleman. And then these two officers, Chief Constable John Little and Sergeant Jim Melville, they both pretty much volunteered to go in so the boy would release these hostages. They went in a car down to Ayr with the boy. And then in the end, the boy actually did give up. These police officers were brave enough and had played a big part in the boy giving up. And then once they had pretty much caught him and he gave up, he shot the car with a gun. You can see in the picture, blew the window out of it just to prove that the gun was loaded and he would have had the ability to shoot. Now this next room is an interesting one as well, because this was the police pipe band, which sadly over the years less and less the members were police and less of the police played like bagpipes or whatever, so they just decided, once there was only like 3 or 4 of the whole band that were actually police, they decided just to phase it out because it probably wasn't cost effective. But this gives you an idea of the uniform they used to wear in the pipe band. It's quite cool to see. This is the horse's saddle from the mounted police, which you do still get in the Glasgow area. And I think round Parkhead, like the Celtic football pitch and that, they still need the mounted police for the amount of people. I think it's easier for them to kind of chase after folk or just keep Abbey in order, because you wouldn't get a police car up some of those little streets around the stadium. This is cups and awards that the police had won, because they used to participate in a lot of sporting events and local things in the community. And in this next room, this is an example of how the police uniforms changed, starting back in the Victorian era in the 1800s. It's almost like a navy blue, almost military-like uniform, leading up more to the modern day standards. You can see here how it was in like the 70s and that, with the Bobby's bonnet. Yeah, 1949, that one there. So cool, folks. Now look at the different hats here. And then this here is demonstrating how the police assist the mountain rescue teams when they're taking like injured people off the hills, which is a common thing around here. As you know from my videos, the hills and mountains are extreme in the Angus area and all over Scotland, and sometimes people get into difficulty and it's teams of folk like this that put their own lives at risk to go and save them from the hills. I believe this ice axe here was actually gifted to the museum from one of the families who sadly lost somebody on the hill. So it's interesting just to see it here and tell the wee story of the mountain rescue along with the police here in Angus. And then this is some awards here, medals in this case. But that's been cool. It's like a wide variety of police from like the beginning of the police force all the way until now. Look at these old lanterns, which must have been potentially on bikes. Maybe that was just the torches back in the day they carried about. Yeah, number 6, that almost looks like a wartime helmet right there. Oh, aye, Perth Police World War II helmet right there, folks. It reminds me of the policeman's helmet from, what's it called, Dad's Army. So check it out, folks. This is actually the cameras that they used to use to take the mug shots. The person would stand under here and then that would measure their height. And look, there's a photograph there. They used to take it, and these cameras are so old fashioned. You can see they've got the wooden frame on them, the wooden body. And it's so interesting to see cameras like this compared to the camera that I'm recording this video on. It's amazing how technology's moved on. And I believe this one here, it was new in 1937. Oh, number 5 it is, I was looking at. Aye, so this camera here, 1937, and it was still used up until 1972, which is a crazy long life of a camera they've gotten out of that. The technology had probably moved on so far, that camera would have been out of its place at that time. And look at this is the interesting police radios. A pocket phone. Wow, look at this circuitry inside that there, that's interesting. And then this must have been the police radio. It's a bigger unit. It's like what you see on Heartbeat on the little like Ford Anglia or whatever. And then police whistles. I can see it's Perthshire Constabulary and things. It says Dundee, Arbroath. So each area would have had their police whistle with the local area stamped onto it. Yeah, so that's super cool, folks. Super interesting. So this Tayside Police Museum, folks, is open from 11 till 3. And I think it's open from Thursdays to Sundays. I'm sure that's what he said. And thanks so much to that gentleman. I think they're the Kirriemuir Heritage Trust that's like running that place, and it's fully voluntary. And I think they're struggling, obviously. Well, I don't know if they're struggling, but they were saying the Kirriemuir Museum in the square of Kirrie is actually struggling just now for funds, and it's linked with the museum in Brechin and one other town, and all three of those museums are going to have to close next year unless they get a cash injection of like, I think it was like 500 grand or whatever they could really do with. But another thing, if anybody's in this Kirriemuir area, you should definitely go into the police museum. It's free to have a look around and it's so interesting. And then, like I said earlier, if you hate kids or whatever, there's things for them to get involved in and look at, and they can try on the uniforms, they can look at how things were back in the day. So I just really want to say shout out to that museum, and thanks a lot for letting me see inside all the things that I saw and letting me record it to share with the world. Anybody that's in the Kirriemuir area, I would definitely advise going in there, because museums like that need the support of the local community to keep going, and even tourists from all over the world. If you're in the Kirriemuir area, nip in by there. It's a friendly environment with some really interesting things to see. Anyway, I'm back in my car. I'm going to end this video here, folks. I'll be back soon with the next adventure, wherever I end up going. So, tune in soon, folks.